In this GlassTrax video, I'll be covering how to create and edit users within GlassTrax. Now this is different than increasing your license count. If you are growing, and let's say you have 4 users and you've hired a 5th person to help with order entry, please reach out to us and let us know so that we can update your license count. Otherwise, if you come in here and create a new user, they won't be able to log in. And so we want to make sure that you have all the access you need in order to run your company. So please let us know if you'd like to increase your license count prior to adding a new user for that. However, if you are, let's say, replacing an employee, someone's left and you've hired a replacement and you need to create a new user for that replacement employee, or if you are just editing a current employee's permissions, let me show you how to do that here. So the first thing you're going to do is come to this miscellaneous tab, go to the master files section and click on the users button. If it is a new user, you'd come in here and hit the N button. If it is an existing user, you'd either look them up with the binoculars or type in the user ID if you know it and pull them in. If it's an existing user, you'd then click the E to edit. Now, you are new users, you need to define a user ID and a branch ID. On existing users, those should be defined previously. On existing users, you'd come down, as well as new users, you'd come down and establish a user name. You can give them initials and give them an email. Now notice those are not bold fields, so they are not required, but it is nice to have that as well. You can also come down here and establish a password for them. So this is useful if a user comes to you and says, hey, I've forgotten my password, can you help me log in? As long as you have access to this screen, you can come in, pull the user in, and reset the password for them. So with that being said, it is very wise to limit access to this screen because anyone who has access to this screen could come in and change a user's password, which would cause a lot of problems for you. So make sure that this is cut down to just supervisors and managers who can get into this screen. Now moving down, I can come down and put in my default warehouse and a default sales rep. Now if this is an order entry person, as we had previously mentioned, you would want to have a sales rep ID in here defined so that when they're entering in orders and quotes, the inside sales rep ID auto-fills for them. Now, if you get to this point and you say, oh shoot, I haven't established a sales rep ID, it's no problem. You just come here to accounts receivable, go to the sales rep screen right here, and you can go ahead and create one. Well, I'm going to pull in one that already exists, my test user. You pull it in here and create them. I usually mark them as both. That way you can use them as an outside sales rep or an inside sales rep, and it's a little bit easier to handle there. And then you just come in here and you type in that ID or do a lookup to find that ID. The release limit is referring to a percentage of debt that you can go ahead and release to that customer. So if they are past due or over their credit limit, you can go ahead and say, well, we'll release 10% of that. If the order is less than 10% of what they owe us, then we'll go ahead and release that. The commission schedule here is applicable if this is a user who gets commissions, but most of our customers actually assign the commission schedule here on this sales rep maintenance screen. Now coming down, I can come in, I can hide material costs and I can lock material costs. Also coming down here, I can choose the user's preference on imperial metrics or imperial or metric measurement systems. You can also have a read-only user by checking this box. That means that the user will be able to log in, but they will not be able to manipulate or edit data in any way. Down here we have a logout after certain minutes of inactivity. I recommend setting that to 30 or 60 minutes, especially if you go to lunch and you leave an order open in edit mode and the server crashes. Now that order record is locked and you'll have to call us to be able to release that. So it's always smart to close out a GlassTrax when you're not using it. But if that's not a good habit that you have formed, then try to do this logout after X amount of minutes of inactivity. Now we get to the menu options portion of this. If I am going to edit or set the menu options for this user, I have 2 ways of doing that. I can come to set menu options here, and you can see here we have general ledger, processing, and then screens. It's just as if you're going through a text version of all the tab, section, and screen names here. So you can come down and you can turn them all off, an entire tab, or you can say I want the entire tab off, but I'm going to turn on the processing, or turn off the processing, excuse me. So then you can come in there and say that's off. So this is an older way of doing it because it is a little bit more manual. However, it is very useful because we have this copy options from user. So as I mentioned, let's say this is a new order entry person and you've already established permissions or menu options for a different order entry person. The easiest way to handle that is to come copy options from user, type in the user's ID that you want to copy from, and hit OK. And then it goes ahead and brings it in, and you don't have to do all that manual work of assigning which screens that person should have access to. The newer way of handling this is through the security report. I'm going to go ahead and maximize this here and hit the eyeball. And what it does is it gives you a glance of all users and the screens that they all have access to. If it is green, then the user has access to that screen. If it is red, the user does not have access to that screen. And if it is gray, as you can see down here, the user does have access to the screen, but in a view-only mode, so they are unable to edit anything on that screen. So in this case, that view only is they can look at the customer's account, but they cannot adjust anything. They can't change credit terms, credit limit, addresses, route, anything like that. The other nice thing about this screen is, let's say I'm going to go ahead and update this test user. Let's actually turn off that processing section for them as we did in the previous screen. I can click and drag and then right click and say disable, and it turns them red. So now that test user no longer has access to the processing screens within the general ledger tab. When you're done, you hit the save button and you're done with the permissions portion of the user setup. Now there are other options on here, for example this 2 and 3 tab, which were added to GlassTrax by other customers by request. And I would recommend that you take a look at those. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. But the basics of this setting up a user or editing a user are all on this first tab. So I'd focus mostly on here as you are getting things rolling within GlassTrax. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Our email is glasstraxtech@kssco.com. Thank you.